Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Princeton, where in our open and welcoming community, we live on our message of hope, love, justice, and joy. We extend a special welcome to our visitors this morning. We're really happy that you've joined us. And we'd love to get to know you after the service. If you haven't already, please stop by the newcomer table just outside those back doors of Robinson Lounge, and we can get you any information that you need about our congregation. Happenings in the back of your order of service has many announcements about our upcoming events and activities, including that beginning today and continuing on the second Sunday of each month, Zen meditation and Dharma talks will be offered at 11:45 in Foz Theater. Whether you are a beginning or experienced meditator, all are welcome, and you can just drop in today and then afterwards the second Sunday of every month. Also, tomorrow at 7 p.m., the Princeton Clergy Association and the Coalition for Peace Action are holding the annual Community Multi-Faith Martin Luther King Day worship service. It's at Nassau Presbyterian Church on Nassau Street, and there's a live stream option. You can check your email for that live stream link, and we'll send it out again tomorrow. It's always a rich, vibrant, and diverse service with great music in a very warm setting. So we hope you'll come on by and honor King in this broad community worship service. Also, all congregants and guests are invited to join the Women's Alliance this coming Thursday, January 18th on Zoom only for lunch and the program Life After Dobbs, the New Reality for Women in a Post-Roe World with Jamie Thal, co-chair of UU Faith Action's Reproductive Justice Task Force. Lunch and socializing starts on Zoom at noon, and the program will start at 1. The Zoom information was in the last e-happenings that you received, but if you need it again, just email the office. We'll send you that link. And lastly, the Afghan family, the Rahimis, who joined us in early April last year, moved to their own apartment in Hamilton, New Jersey last week with the help of many UU Princeton volunteers. They are pleased with their new location, which is very close to the dad's job. They are very grateful for all the help and support they received during their time of temporary housing in our building. And our volunteers will continue to provide the family with support in English lessons and medical and dental care and all sorts of help. And we are very grateful to all of the volunteers who helped make this ministry happen. So if you were a part of that, will you please stand so that we can thank you for helping the Rahimi family? And now, if your name is Michelle Oshner, will you please continue standing? Michelle made so much of that happen. We're really grateful to you, Michelle. Thank you so much for that. And now, friends, with love leading us and peace guiding us and grace embracing us, come, let us worship together.
I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by the experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience, and from what I see, I am sure it bends towards justice. Transcendentalist and Unitarian minister Theodore Parker.
And let us join together in the spirit of prayer. Blessed is the day on which we gather in love, and the love that brings us together, and our will to bless one another and the world. May the great spirit that sounds in each heart of peace and wholeness and service sound in our shared lives of the same gifts, only louder as we live them together, proclaiming their grace and power. May we be of greater peace together. May we be of greater wholeness because we are one. May we be of greater service because our strength is gathered. And when we fall from these ideals, may our shared commitment remind us of them as we see them enlivened in this holy human congregation and evermore in this holy human world. And here in the silence of this shared space, we offer these prayers and meditations of our hearts.
In 1947, the first black and white image of a portion of Earth was published. It was taken from an altitude of 65 miles with a rocket constructed out of captured German missile components. In 1967, the first true color image of the full Earth was taken from space. In 1969, an estimated 650 million people watched Neil Armstrong step onto the moon. In 1980, Carl Sagan's 13-part series Cosmos premiered, becoming the most widely watched series in the history of American public television for 10 years in a row. In 1990, when I was 7, space probe Galileo filmed the first full rotation of the Earth. The same year, Voyager 1 shot an iconic photo of the Earth from 6 billion miles away. Carl Sagan described the Earth in this image as a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. He wrote, "Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner. How frequent their misunderstandings, how eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves." It's funny when my 3-year-old points to the whole United States on our globe and says, "Here is our house." My 7-year-old has a bit more perspective. A fairly experienced globetrotter, she's astounded by the fact that not so long ago, people believed the Earth was flat and that it could take them around 4 months to cross the ocean. We once looked together at an old map from antiquity with monsters demarcating the uncharted territory. She asked me if people really believed in monsters. "Maybe they did," I answered. "Or maybe the monsters were a way of showing that what we can't see and what we don't know is really scary." Today, we've gained much more perspective as a species, and yet we find that knowing and seeing more is actually just as frightening as the unknown. When we zoom out, we see ourselves alone in space, packed together on a globe that feels like it's getting more crowded as it seems to grow smaller. And to top it off, we hate, we fight, and we war. How will we see our way out of this? Well, one thing we can do is what humans do best, and that's to build. The billionaires were hard at work building exit spaceships to Mars and luxury floating doomsday shelters. The rest of us need to come up with a better plan. Today's service is titled Building Bridges. And so for this reflection, I first looked up the term bridge builder. Pontifex is the term in Latin. Pons means bridge, and the suffix fex means maker or producer. From pontifex comes the word pontiff. The Pope represents a metaphorical bridge builder between the earth and the divine. If you look up pontifex in the modern American dictionary, you'll find 2 definitions. 1, a priest in ancient Rome, and 2, an obsolete civil engineering term meaning the structure of a bridge. With this in mind, we can think of our bridge building project as any earthly work that connects us spiritually. I turn next to the 3 most popular biblical building stories that I could think of, with the hope that they could provide some important lessons that will help us in our planning. Noah's Ark is the first one. So you know this one: to escape the great flood, Noah builds an ark. God provides the impetus and the blueprints, but notably leaves all of the actual building work to Noah. So building lesson number 1, do not be passively optimistic or rely on divine intervention. We can save ourselves, but only if we are willing to pull up our sleeves and do the hard work that is required. Story number 2, the Tower of Babel. In this one, humanity attempts to build a great big tower to heaven, and God concludes, and I quote, "If as one people speaking the same language, they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them." Building lesson number 2, nothing we plan to do is impossible for us. Lesson 2A, the caveat, we must create a unifying vision and find ways to articulate and to share it. Story number 3, Solomon's Temple. Solomon, wealthy and wise, constructs a great big temple for God that is later destroyed in short order when the people who were compelled to build and maintain it, slaves included, turn against their oppressors. Building lesson number 3, ethics and justice are critical components for the stability and durability of any building project. And with that, I invite you all to zoom back into the here and now. Let's roll up our sleeves and get to work building some bridges, abundant and sturdy enough to save us from ourselves.
There were once 2 brothers who inherited a large farm from their father. They decided they wanted to split the land up so that each could have their own portion. And since a stream ran through the middle of the farm, they decided that the stream would divide the land. There would be 2 farms, one for each brother, with a stream running between them. The brothers were very satisfied with this arrangement. Each was happy with his plot, and they looked forward to living next to each other and helping one another out and raising families together. As often happens, however, in parables about brothers, they soon quarreled. Once it was over a tree whose falling leaves blew from one farm to the other. Once it was about a harvest that proved more abundant on one farm, which seemed a little fishy to the other brother. Once it was overfished, fished from the stream in such numbers that there seemed to be fewer for the other brother. The quarrels quickly built up, and before long, the brothers were not talking to each other anymore. They began to hold each other in this icy contempt, glaring at one another instead of looking upon each other with brotherly love. They were soon suspicious of everything about the other, and their children were even forbidden from playing with their cousins, assuring that this animosity would be generational. One day, a traveling handyman came through town, and he stopped by one of the brothers to see if his farm happened to need any work. The brother asked him if he could do carpentry, and the man said yes. And so the brother asked the man to build a huge fence, a wall really, on his side of the stream. He wanted the fence to be very tall, a wall so that he couldn't even see his brother's house or farm. He wanted a complete barrier between him and his kin so that he could pretend that he wasn't even there. The handyman said that he could take care of that. And he began working as the brother went off into town, where he would be all day picking up supplies and selling his harvest. The original author of this parable seems to be unknown, but versions of it abound. Its arc is familiar, both in story and in life. Siblings, at first close, then growing distanced, then growing divorced. The question is always, will they come back together? In the first biblical story of siblings that we have, the answer is no. Things do not end well for Cain and Abel. Later on, Joseph's brothers, jealous of his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, have him kidnapped and shipped off to Egypt, although that ends up working out well for everyone in the end. On the other hand, Moses and Aaron work and live very well together. Even when they affront God, they do so more or less as brothers. And 2 things are true of sacred stories about siblings. They teach us about our relationships with our actual siblings, if we have them, and they teach us about our relationships with everyone else. They express in vivid relief the senses of intimacy and distance that we feel in our families, which inform everything about all of our other relationships.
We may replicate a family that is a bit too close by insisting on that throughout our lives, or we may rebel against it by creating relationships that are more distanced than optimal. Perhaps the brothers on either side of the stream were so close as children that they, one way or another, were going to create some distance later on in life. Perhaps there was a thread of jealousy that between the two that grew thicker and thicker over the years. Perhaps they missed early opportunities to forgive one another for the slights we all cause, and the chasm just got deeper and deeper. Many of us with siblings or close friends who are like siblings could write our own relationships into that parable, which is part of the point of a parable. And we can wonder is, would we build that wall as well, cutting ourselves off from one another, farming alone, in contempt, a wall only emphasizing the presence of someone else on the other side. Those whom we admire are often those who tear them down, though. This is very much the case with Dr. King, whose legacy and impact on our country and the world we honor this weekend. He, with countless others, broke down walls of racial segregation that for generations had kept Americans apart from each other. He helped inspire actions by everyday people of all races and backgrounds, religions, and ages to chip away and sometimes to barrel through walls that obstructed equality and opportunity. His leadership, spirit, and vision created more racial equality in America than any other single person in our country's history. It is right to celebrate him not only because he was right and not only because he was effective, but also because he, with others, built a movement that inspired, empowered, and equipped so many people to contribute to the betterment of all. And he did so peacefully, with an unshakable commitment to Gandhian nonviolence, principles that he discussed in great detail with his friend and co-conspirator in the racial equality movement, Bayard Rustin. Rustin was a Quaker from the Philly area who was gifted beyond measure in organizing and implementing peaceful protests and rallies for racial justice. The 1963 March for Jobs and Freedom in DC, where King delivered his I Have a Dream speech, benefited greatly from having Rustin as a chief organizer. He was often a quiet and very reliable counselor to the more visible leaders of the movement, keeping a public distance when advantageous, but contributing abundantly to strategy and messaging. That distance that he kept was because he was a gay man, and everyone knew it, at a time when his presence risked discrediting the movement. He also had flirted with communism when he was young, which he came to oppose later on in his life. But the youthful flirtations concerned conservatives. His turning against the murderous legacy of Soviet communism angered his former comrades, and so he really couldn't make anyone happy about that. Fortunately, making people happy didn't seem to be his goal. Rustin wanted to create a better country, one with more equality and opportunity, one without racism, where those on the margins had more paths to better lives. He stayed true to 5 principles in his work: nonviolent tactics, constitutional means, democratic procedures, respect for human personality, and a belief that all people are one. So nonviolence, a la Gandhi, principles that King would fully adopt and remain true to, influenced greatly by his conversations with Rustin about that philosophy. Constitutional means, which means pressuring the political system to effect change in legal ways. Democratic procedures, with democracy meaning the equal participation of everyone. And respect for human personality, or understanding people as diverse people, and a belief that all are one, meaning that amidst this diversity, we are still one. This finding a sense of unity in diversity, which in some schools is the very definition of beauty, was important. Beauty is neither unity nor diversity alone, but beauty is unity coming from diversity. That blending of the individual and the many, that e pluribus unum expression that out of many can form one, is an aspiration of our very faith. We stress respect for the individual, and we stress that individuals are spiritually and materially one in every way. From birth to death and every day in between, our lives are interconnected not only with those alive now, but with the ancestors. And just as the ancestors influenced the world that we co-create today, so too are we co-creating the world that will live beyond us, one in the generations to come, in which the generations to come will roam and wander and love. We have no choice but to be one. We have all kinds of choices about how we live within that unity or in contest of that unity, but that state of oneness is part of our faith. And this is the difficult part to swallow sometimes about Rustin's legacy, that he knew that by minimizing his presence, not his leadership or contributions, but his presence, he might help the movement avoid various attempts to derail its progress because he was gay and was once a communist. It makes me angry that within and beyond the movement, this selfless choice that he made and others acquiesced to was nonetheless effective. He should have been able to be fully present, fully celebrated, and fully open about who he was. And the loss of that authenticity was not only his burden to bear, but the result of communal sin. He saw the world very clearly and made choices to be as effective in creating a better country as he could be at the time, but they were choices no one should have to make. All we can really do is learn from him and honor him, and even more importantly, make sure that no one has to make those kinds of choices going forward. And so he worked often behind the scenes, talking about and planning the movement with more visible leaders. He was also a very detail-oriented guy. There's a story about him instructing people taking calls for information about an event to all use the same name, so that if people call back, they'll think they're talking to the same person. And he was sure to tell volunteers to make peanut butter sandwiches instead of cheese sandwiches for marchers because the cheese would melt in the heat. And he also organized a rally of 250,000 people at the March on Washington. No detail too small, no vision too big. He and King and others faced barrier after barrier to equality, historical, political, often violent and murderous, and found ways to move through them. They bridged chasms. They made people believe that progress was possible. They showed that nonviolence is more powerful and transformative than violence, and the fruits of the efforts were cultural and legislative changes thought absolutely impossible not long before their efforts. They did this by bringing people together with a vision and strategy and a spirit of unity and love. They did this through building bridges and then empowering people and others to cross them. They're like the Buddhist monk brothers Adrian and Ananda, who in story visit a village whose bridge had been destroyed, wiped out by a storm. The villagers are quarreling about what to do, how and if to build a new one, and where, and what materials would be best. No one is doing anything or even listening to one another. They're just standing around bickering. And the brothers who are monks listen mindfully for a little while, and then they offer up a plan, and then they just start slowly building the bridge and ask others to join in. And before long, the village is working together and the people are being harmonious. They listened, they came up with a plan, and then they started working. Reflection, strategy, action. If you've been through a strategic development process, you know that well. And quarreling will often stop when the work begins, because then progress is being made and that energizes people and brings them together. People want to be part of that process. As we look at King's legacy today, that sense of action can give us a path forward. There is a lot of bickering today about strategy, a lot of arguing about an approach, a lot of theory, and all the critiques that come with it. People who agree 90% about something can spend more time arguing with allies about the other 10% than doing something to engage the uncommitted. Meanwhile, those who work against the equality and opportunity that King's legacy demands that we pursue today lean back and smile. Their work of obstruction and opposition advanced by siblings who can't get along with each other, who wall themselves off from collaborators and allies because of this difference or that one. King never even gave up on the white people who wanted to kill him, and the radicals who thought he was too soft, and the militants who called him names and taunted him. He didn't wall himself off even from them. His belief in love and hope and unity disallowed that. His morals disallowed that. And his vision included a country where even they had more freedom and opportunity, where they too were blessed by living in a more beloved community. One of the many instructions that King's legacy can give us today is to build fewer walls between us and others, or to build none at all, to never stop seeing one another, listening to one another, finding common ground and working toward shared visions. His legacy is enormous and complicated, but this guiding sense of hope and unity in action can be touchstones to guide us in today's complicated world. They can help us tear down the walls between us, that we might serve God and one another and those to come with the strength of love, as King would say. Walls preclude all of that, but bridges help facilitate it. We left that story with the handyman agreeing to build a wall between the two farms and the one brother leaving to go into town. We pick it up with that brother returning to find that the handyman is long gone and to see that a wall has not been built at all. Instead, the handyman built a bridge over the stream that separated the two farms. And the brother who ordered the wall goes to the bridge and sees his brother standing on the other side. And the brothers cross and they meet in the middle. And the brother who didn't order a wall says how happy he is that his brother decided to build that bridge, how he had missed him, and how much he wants to be close. And this opens up the first brother's heart, and the two begin rebuilding their relationship. Their kids come out and play, their partners embrace, and the brothers walk around each other's farms for the rest of the night, catching up, laughing, and beginning to repair what has been broken. Our call on this King weekend and every day is to build bridges that connect instead of walls that obstruct, to open our hearts to one another and the stranger and even the opponent, harnessing the strength of love to overcome the evil of racism and all oppressions, and to envision a beloved community and to share that vision with others. For people are desperate for visions of the good, the peaceful, the hopeful, and the just. People are thirsty for your faith in the good and the true. And when you share your hope, your optimism, you are building those qualities of the Spirit between the two of you. And you are becoming a living part of King's legacy that saw things as they were and changed them for the better. May we too, as many in diverse, strong, and hopeful company, leave a similar mark on the world. May it be so, and amen. And at the end of our hour, we extinguish our chalice, knowing that its light carries us until we gather again. Go forth grateful for the moments before you, the breath within you, the people among you, and the Spirit guiding you toward lives of love and kindness. And go forth knowing that you are held always and always with everyone else by that great love of no beginning and never ending. Go in peace, and amen.